Ruby Franke. Who is she? What has she pled guilty to?
Yeah, it's not very often you see things from social media actually leaking into the mainstream news. We're going to take a dive and see what everybody is talking about right now. So, if you're not familiar with YouTube influencers and some of the celebrities we now have on because of online media, you may not know a lot of their names, and awesome. If you don't, that's good. You're a lot happier and healthier that way, I promise. That being said, it's now leaked into the mainstream news that Ruby Franke updates have come up. What are these Ruby Franke updates? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
Now, Andrew, you're someone who, up until recently, was completely detached from all this YouTube stuff.
Mhm.
So it sounds like this is a case that actually has piqued your interest, which is very surprising.
Well, yeah, I have to admit, when I saw the name first coming up, I thought, who the heck is that? And through you, I learned who she is, and you're going to show our viewers a lot more about who she is. And so I'm going to give you the floor in a second. But first, I have all the documents. She actually went into court in a very unusual plea agreement. What I see as a very unusual agreement, and we'll tell you why. She has pled guilty to 4 of 6 counts. Why? I don't know, Lainey. Before I get into the legal part of it, why don't you give us some background? Who is Ruby Franke for those of our viewers who are like me and didn't really know?
Yeah, so I actually made a tiny slideshow for everybody today. So we have Ruby Franke, by the way that she says it. It's not Frank. I might even say Frank by accident. You know how we be slipping up with words. But thank you, Swoop, for clearing that one up. And you may be thinking, who is Swoop? Swoop is a YouTuber who has a very big team behind them. They have made very detailed, as you can see, very long videos about this whole Ruby Franke situation. If we went in here in every detail in the video, we'd be here for hours and hours. So, if you're looking for more content after this, after being sure to check every single one of our own videos out, leaving a comment, liking, and subscribing, be sure to go do the same for Swoop's channel. Now, our players over here, we have Ruby Franke. Ruby is a mommy vlogger. What that means is that she can be seen often taking recordings of her day and her children. So, her children and her family is a huge part of her content. It's the central focus is her as a parent. She has 6 kids. Insane. A
Wow.
lot of the times you can see in the footage of her kids, of all ages, teenagers, kids now, some of them above the age of 18. Um, she would be filming them. They every time she'd like come on, sit them down, let's make a video. And I don't know if we know for certain, but it can be presumed that if they didn't cooperate, that they could, see some disciplinary action. A lot of the times the kids weren't exactly thrilled to be in the video. And she would post a lot of her parenting choices and disciplinary styles. Uh, we also have Jody Hildebrand, who is our mental health counselor. She was actually licensed and is a mother of 2. That being said, her license of I want to say back in like 2012. Sorry, it might be a little iffy on the dates. She was put on probation for 18 months, and then she still had to, just put it on her website that her
Hmm.
license had been on probation when she did start back up, but after it was supposed to be for 10 years. After 5, she got it appealed. Um, so I believe around 2017, she no longer had to put that on there. But part of why she had her license put on probation is that she would tell people, private client sensitive information, you know, talking to people's schools about their clients addiction problems, and also going to their church and divulging this information to like the church. So
Oh my goodness, that's a
Jody.
terrible thing for any professional to divulge the personal information of a client. Is just that's a horrible thing. I mean, as
Mhm.
attorneys, and the same thing applies to a licensed mental health counselor like her. Our clients come to us and they depend upon us and rely upon us so that they can tell us anything and all. And the things that we hear, they don't go beyond the closed doors. So that's fairly serious. That's very serious, I'm going to say.
And it's similar to you, it's like, as an attorney, it's like a mental health counselor, like, this is people that you're telling very sensitive, private information, so to, like, go out and say something is pretty wild. Alright, so, some insight on Ruby's channel. Like I said, we could be here for years, decades, if we wanted to really go deep into it. But basically, aside from just her day-to-day activities, she would show sometimes disciplining her kids. I'm not exactly sure on the context of it, but in Soup's video, she plays clips of from Ruby's perspective, telling one of her little girls who in the video appears to maybe be around 4 years old, just a little baby kid, and saying, "If you cut anything else in this house, I am gonna cut, like, this stuffed animal's head off,"
Oh
and
my.
he seems obviously, freaking out. That's her little buddy, we love our
It's horrible. I
little
mean, like, I like my little Grinch that I have here, and if somebody threatened to cut its head off, I'd be just destroyed. Seriously, I'd be
You'd be wanting
devastated.
to cut their head off, yeah.
That'd be
Like,
horrible, but I mean, I am kidding, but I'm not kidding. For a little kid to cut the head off their teddy bear, come on.
yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just like with the Grinch, I mean, even as an adult, we have our little stuff. It's like, "Don't mess with my stuff," so it's like, as
Right,
a kid, this poor
exactly.
kid,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's that, totally normal stuff on Ruby's part. Refusing to bring her kids lunch. The school called Ruby at one point, letting Ruby know that one of her kids didn't bring lunch to school. So Ruby was, sure to let the school know that it's the kid's responsibility to pack up their lunch and that the kid had said she had lunch already. So Ruby was not going to be bringing lunch to her kid because, that was all her kids' responsibility. So it's just like letting her kids go hungry because she's, you know, not happy with them. Um, her son, she had one of her older teenage boys. He used to share a room with one of his brothers, but he lost those privileges for 7 months and was sleeping on a beanbag. And that same son was also sent away to a wilderness camp, basically, left to be on his own, in the woods, as kind of like a disciplinary action. So so what happened? Uh, CPS ended up getting called on Ruby's family when, she had to deal with that and actually did stop posting on her own channel. Uh, then she goes with her girl Jody and they start their own new channel called Connections. And this channel, it
Hmm.
helps people correct their distortions, in their distortions in their views. Homosexuality, any adult thoughts, impure thoughts. Um, so yeah, they were very Soup describes them as like a cult, basically trying to say, listen, like you have these problems, uh, these are issues, these are impure, you're gonna learn pure ways, basically. So why are we bringing this all up today? And why are we now taking years of content and bringing it back to the forefront? And why have you guys been hearing about this on the channel TV news? Well, a child was found emaciated and malnourished with duct tape wrapped around his wrist and ankles.
Mm.
And this was one of Ruby's kids. And this was actually not
Mhm.
even in Ruby's neighborhood. This was a separate house where the kid, went to the house, didn't know where, escaped from the house with the duct tape, looking for food and water. And, when asked, "Where's your mom?" the kid didn't know. And the neighbor had mentioned also having had issues with these neighbors, like on previous occasions, that stuff was weird. So when all this is said and done, with Ruby's kid being found in this condition, we are now talking about the legal side of all of this, and Ruby has pled guilty. And now this is where our legal professional Andrew has uh his professional insight on this.
Lainey, that was an incredible presentation that you just gave. It's horrific. And I was thinking as you were showing all of that, and I know what I now know from watching hearing on Monday, December 18th, and from leading the documents. But to think that these were little kids, because I know I've seen some other people just read through the legal documents, that's fine. But to think that these are little kids and they're doing all these things to these little kids, and I mean, I don't see the purpose of it all. I just really don't. I get the idea then, as someone admittedly who didn't follow her at all, she was holding herself out as some kind of an expert as to how to do childcare. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically her content is, and like how we said, there, let me get the exact word again, what it
Mhm,
is, the distortions. She's
mhm,
trying to resolve her family's distortions. Her kids are misbehaving and they have these distortions. And it's basically her channel is, putting herself kind of in like this, you know, role of authority, and that she's doing things correctly. And so it wasn't until a while, she's had her channel for years, but it wasn't until things started getting a little bit crazy with the older child that, um, people started realizing, this is child abuse, and started unsubscribing. But for a long time, this channel and a lot of channels on YouTube who do inappropriate things, really showcasing the kids, putting these kids who can't really consent to having their public image in front of these hundreds of thousands of people, um, just really taking advantage of their kids with YouTube, with child actors. Child actors have to get paid, and money has to be put away for them and stuff like that when it's on YouTube. There's not really a lot of rules and regulations for this content. So like these kids are suffering and not benefiting from it. They don't have any say because they're not going to fight back with their parent. One of the kids actually, when the call was made for 911 and everything was, finally starting to put the gears in motion. According to one of Scoop's videos, she said that one of the kids even posted like a picture of it saying like finally, that something was being done about it. It's a whole crazy
oh,
situation.
okay,
When
I have some more questions about one of the sidekicks, but let's hold on to the questions until we get some more context here with the legal documents. I have some more questions for you about a co-defendant who you mentioned, Jody Hildebrandt. But let's take a look at the document that has been filed in the court in Utah. This is the plea agreement to which Ruby Franke, has signed. This is a signed statement of defendant in support of guilty plea and certificate of counsel. And she originally faced 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. 2 of them are being dismissed, but she has pled guilty to 4. This is number 1, aggravated child abuse. All 4 of them, we'll focus on this one, then we'll skip past the next 3. All 4 of them are second-degree felonies in Utah. All 4 of them include a 1 to 15-year sentence in the United States prison and a fine of $10,000 plus a 90% surcharge in court plus $53 court security fee, which is the least of our problems right now. But there are the 4 counts in open court on December 18th of 2023. Ruby Franke acknowledged that she read it. She had it read it to her. She actually said in court she read, quote unquote, every word. And so she does understand the nature and the elements of the crimes to which she is pleading guilty. The elements of the crimes to which she's pleading guilty are aggravated child abuse. And see, they use the initials because they're young. They're young kids. The
Mhm.
son, I believe, is 12 years old now, and the daughter is now 9 years old now. And we're only using their initials in this court paper, RF and EF. Uh, and the counts essentially are aggravated child abuse, a second degree felony in that the defendant intentionally or knowingly inflicted upon a child, here EF, serious physical injury or having the care or custody of such child caused or permitted another to inflict serious physical injury upon said child. See that language there, or permitted another? So there's an acknowledgement here that not only does Ruby Franke admit that she engaged in this conduct, but she also permitted another. And that is, of course, allegedly Jody Hildebrandt. The next step here is that I understand that by pleading guilty, I will be admitting that I committed the crimes listed above. I stipulate and agree that the following facts describing my conduct and the conduct of other persons for which I am criminally liable. These facts provide a basis for the court to accept my guilty plea and prove the elements of the crimes to which I am pleading guilty. So we're not going to read it all, but a trigger warning to people that, are offended easily. This will offend you. From approximately May 22nd of 2023 until August 30th of 2023, in Washington County, Utah, the defendant, Ruby Franke, intentionally or knowingly inflicted and allowed another adult to inflict serious physical injuries upon her children that were ages 9, EF, and 11 to 12, RF, as more fully described below. And Lainey, some of this is what you've talked about before, but with additional detail. The defendant's actions involved the physical torture of RF. Initially, RF was forced to do physical tasks for hours and days at a time. These included wall sits, carrying boxes full of books up and down stairs, and working outside. Eventually, RF was forced to do outside labor without shoes and in the summer heat. He was forced to stand in the direct sunlight for several days. He was forced to remain outside at all hours of the day and night for extended periods of time. These actions resulted in repeated and serious sunburns and blistered and sloughing skin. RF was denied adequate water for several of the days he was required to remain in the summer heat, and he was punished when he secretly consumed water. Imagine that, having a
Mhm.
child working outside in the summer hot desert heat. The child, secret has to sneak. Why should anyone sneak around? I give my dog water every day, for gosh sake. Before I have my
Yeah.
first cup of coffee in the morning, I give my dog fresh water. So the poor child tries to secretly get some water, and he was denied. He was punished. He was denied sufficient food, and when given food, he was given very plain meals. For example, rice and chicken. While others in the house ate regular food and more flavorful meals, he was isolated from other people and denied all forms of entertainment, including books, notebooks, and electronics.
Mhm. And it's just like when you say it like that, it's just like the night all forms of entertainment, including books. It's just like a lot of parents wish that their kid would even read a book, and that how it says he was isolated from other people and denied all forms of entertainment. That was another thing, is that the kids would get their phones taken away, and a lot of these kids also described in the videos talking about how they don't even have friends like at school. So it's like you're going through, being a kid, being a teenager, you have all these hormones, all these growing pains. A lot of people, there have, a lot of people that aren't going through this stuff are already having issues socializing at school. And then you just come home and you, for whatever reason, you parents decide that, or your mother decides that she wants to punish you, and that your punishment is basically heavy labor, like hard labor, doing stuff all day, can't even sit down and read a book. Like you said, you give your dog water. It's just like these children are being treated like worse than animals. Like
This is
people die
crazy.
without water. Yeah.
Yeah, this is crazy. In addition, after RF attempted to run away in July, his hands and feet were regularly bound. Binding included being tied to the defendant and to weights. Many times, the binding included using two sets of handcuffs, one on RF's wrists and one on his ankles. At times, with RF lying on his stomach, ropes were used to tie the two sets of handcuffs together so that his arms and lower legs were lifted off the ground. The bindings resulted in injuries to RF's wrists and ankles, where the handcuffs cut through the skin and damaged the muscle and tissues. These injuries were treated with homeopathic remedies and covered with duct tape.
Ah. It's
Then the
like
binding.
the injuries.
That's crazy. Then the bindings were placed on top of the duct tape. Specific instances of abuse committed by the defendant include 1, kicking RF while wearing boots, 2, holding his head underwater, and 3, cutting off oxygen by placing her hands over his mouth and nose. That's count 1. Count 2, the actions described above caused severe emotional harm to RF due to the fact that they began in May and escalated throughout the summer months. Additionally, the defendant and another adult regularly sought to indoctrinate RF and convince him that he was evil and possessed, and that he needed to willingly be obedient to avoid punishments, and that the punishments were necessary to repent. He was also told that everything that was being done to him were acts of love. If that's not one of the more crazy things you can ever say to a kid, I don't know what is. Count 3,
Mhm.
the defendant's actions also caused severe emotional harm to EF, other than binding and the specific instances of RF was subjected to. EF was subjected to the same treatment as her brother. She was isolated and this is a 9-year-old girl, for God's sakes. She
Mhm.
was also repeatedly told she was evil and possessed. The punishments were necessary for her to be obedient and to repent, and these things were being done to her in order to help her. EF was convinced that she was evil and needed to go through these things in order to repent. And the final count, the defendant's actions caused 2 or more physical injuries to EF. She was forced to work outside in the heat barefoot. She was also forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for an extended period of time. EF's feet were repeatedly injured by, and she was repeatedly sunburned. When examined on August 30th, these wounds were apparent by scabs, blisters, and sloughing skin. So those are the counts. The rest of it is a very significant legal language. She's entering these pleas voluntarily. The judge in the case on Monday, December 18th, actually, went through all of this with her, and she admitted that she read every word of it. She understands that she waived various rights. This is important. When you go to court, when we attorneys go to court, and you're representing a criminal, there's what's called a colloquy. And the judge in his colloquy asks various questions to make sure that a defendant understands what they are waiving, if they are so waiving. And these are the rights. They're waiving jury trial. She is waiving her right to cross-examination and confrontation of witnesses. She's waiving her right to compel witnesses. She's waiving her right to testify in the privilege against self-incrimination. She's waiving her right to a presumption of innocence and burden of proof. She's also, this is significant, she is waiving her right to appeal. So as you know, Lainey, in a lot of cases, people are convicted in court and they turn around and say, oh, the judge made so many mistakes that I'm going to appeal. Here she is saying, I know that under the Utah Constitution, it's pretty much in line with the United States Constitution. If I were convicted by a jury or judge, I would have the right to appeal my conviction and sentence. If I could not afford the costs of an appeal, the state would pay those costs for me. I understand that I am giving up my right to appeal my conviction if I plead guilty, which she has. I understand that if I wish to appeal my sentence, I must file a notice of appeal within 30 days after my sentence is entered. So she says that she understands she is giving up all of those rights. This is just pointing out that she understands the potential penalties. As I said before, I think the money amount is the least amount of her harm. She is acknowledging that in this plea agreement, she's admitting that the sentences will be consecutive. In other words, if she gets 4 prison terms, she's not going to serve them all at the same time. She is going to serve them one at a time, 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And each of these counts carries with it anywhere between 1 and 15 years. So this is just additional language in which she points out that she is waiving her rights. And the next step is on number 3 that we see here. The defendant shall submit to a pre-sentence investigation with adult probation and parole. And what that means is that, again, you see number 5, she agrees that everything's going to be consecutive. What number 3 means is that now she has entered this guilty plea. The court has accepted and entered her guilty plea, but now the court is going to engage in a pre-sentence investigation, looking at her record, looking at what she's done, looking at what she's done in the past to see if there are any mitigating factors, aggravating factors, put it all together. And then at that time, the court will agree to whatever charges there are. So more language. She'll never be able to, even if she does get out of jail. She acknowledges that she'll never be allowed to own a firearm. And the
Thank
last,
God.
yeah, and the last page. Here's her signature, by the way. So you know that we're
Mhm.
not just reading some piece of paper that we pulled off the internet. There's her signature, Ruby Franke. Signed it on December 18th. That's her signature. Here's her defense attorney, Lamar Winward, also signed it. The prosecutor electronically signed it. And there's Judge Walton's signature and the stamp of the court. So that's it. That is the document in which she's pled guilty. There's one
Mhm.
thing that's very unusual about this. There's one thing that's extremely unusual, and I referred to this at the beginning of our podcast, and that is that usually in a plea, what you do is that you agree, all right, we will either admit to sufficient facts or tender a guilty on condition that the prosecution, offer a certain sentence. And so going in that your client is going to plead guilty or admit to sufficient facts in exchange for XYZ sentence. That's the way it's done 90% of the time. In this case, it's very unusual. She is admitting that she is guilty. She's admitting guilt on 4 counts. The bargain was that 2 of the counts were removed. But there's no sentence. No sentence has been agreed upon, at least not in writing, and at least not in open court. And so this is a very unusual thing, and it's wide open to the pre-sentencing investigation and what the judge decides to do when the next hearing on this is on February 20th of 2024.
Mhm. That means that we're gonna hear what she's sentenced to then, but
Yeah.
usually what you're saying is that in advance we would have an idea of what's exactly gonna happen.
Yeah, my client comes to me and I get the police report, I get the discovery, I take a look at it, I talk to the prosecutor, and my client says, try the case, I'm innocent. Or sometimes a client will tell me, talk to the prosecutor, let's see if we can work something out. And that often happens. That often happens. You talk to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor says, well, all right, they have a good record. There are mitigating factors here. There's no record. Nobody was injured, or maybe if some property was damaged, they agree to make full and complete restitution in 60 days or 90 days. So, based on all of these factors, the prosecution might say, all right, Mr. Myers, your client will enter a guilty plea, and we will ask the court for X sentence. That's normally the way it goes, but this is a very unusual case in that it's somewhat risky because there are 4 counts, as I said before, and each count carries between 1 and 15 years. So do the math.
Mhm.
The minimum would be 4 years, but the maximum would be 4 times 15. And my math isn't that great, but that is 60 years. 4 times 15 is 60 years. So how old is she? 32, I think. Something
Yeah,
like
I'm
that.
not sure, yeah.
So, yeah, she's in her early 30s, and so to get a 60-year sentence, that's pretty much a life sentence, unless you're really lucky.
Mhm.
So it's a somewhat unusual agreement, and we won't hear the other shoe drop until February 20th when they have the final sentencing. But that's the legal end of it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, like you said, she read every single word of it, is absolutely insanity. I can't even imagine. Obviously, there's something going on to be a parent to even do that all in the first place, but I can't even imagine looking at all of that and being like, "Yep, I did it," and just openly, the it's, I guess, kind of good that she pled guilty because, obviously she was doing this stuff, and it's good that she's holding some accountability in that way, but it's also insane, like you said, it's like she could be potentially spending up to the rest of her life in prison, and even then 4 years, I mean, not
Mhm.
I think that she deserves more than 4 years, I think she's ruining these kids' lives, um, but I can't imagine doing these things, I can't imagine saying that you're reading through all of this and signing that, and I can't imagine
Yeah.
I can't it's incomprehensible.
Your presentation was interesting to me because, as we admitted at the very beginning of this, I'm a lawyer. I've got my eye on the legal end of things, but I didn't know a whole lot about this particular person. One of the things that it was said that she had done, and one of the reports I read about this was that, and this is timely to this time of year, apparently in one video, Frankie said she and her husband told their two youngest children that they would not be getting any presents from Santa Claus because they had been selfish and weren't responding to many punishments, which we just heard about. One of them included cleaning the floor. So that's the kind of negativity they were imposing on these poor kids. And it's just, I guess some of this was cloaked in a little bit of a lot of religious tone, which, I just find that really reprehensible, that those kids were subjected to that. And a couple of the things that were of note. One of the good things about the agreement is that, due to the fact that she has entered a guilty plea, there will be no trial. And the good thing about that is that the children will not have to testify because, as you know, in the United States, under the Constitution, you have a right to confront witnesses. And so witness testimony is required in a case like this. So the kids would have had to have gone on the stand. And, what a horrible thing for those kids to have to relive the whole thing. I mean, imagine the type of counseling that they're in now. Imagine the type of trauma that these kids will have for the rest of their life. So to be re-traumatized by a trial, just imagine how awful that would be. But apparently that has all been, that's all gone by the wayside by the fact that there will be no trial. And the other thing is that Ruby Franke has agreed to testify against this Jody Hildebrandt, who I don't know a whole lot about. All I know is that Jody Hildebrandt holds herself out as a, quote, relationship counselor. Although if I needed a relationship counselor, I think she'd be the last one I'd go to. And
You don't want your
also,
information told to everybody?
not that there's anything to tell, but I mean, that's just horrible. And again, as part of the agreement, Ruby Franke has agreed to testify against Hildebrandt. So I don't know, just what a horrible case. Not that any of the cases we've talked about recently are great cases, but I mean, just to traumatize these little kids, just, it's beyond me. It really is.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, the fact that this little girl's even thinking, like, "Oh, I deserved this. I am, like, possessed," or whatever it was, it's just really horrifying to even think about. And the fact like, what interests me, I mean, the whole Jody thing, as horrible as it is, it's really interesting that Ruby, like you said, is, like, agreeing to testify against her. Like, the fact that this woman had such an impact in Ruby's life that it's almost kinda like as Swoop has put it, it's like a cult mentality. And one of the things too with Jody is one of the clients that she did divulge, his information, she was saying to that person, "Oh, you need to keep coming, you need to keep coming, you have, oh my god, the distortions. We need to correct your distortions, so you need to keep coming back to therapy." Uh, it sounds, I mean, obviously, like I said before, with Ruby, you have to be some kind of sick in the head to even get to this point in the first place. But it's also interesting to see how it's tying back to someone that you would think Jody would be completely detached, but the fact that now she's so involved in this is crazy.
The other thing, which I get, it was obvious to me, and I guess it's probably obvious to everybody else. But anyhow, one of the things that just really strikes me out this and other types of cases is these people that hold themselves out to us as though they know more than us. I mean, go to a bookstore. I know a lot of people don't go to bookstores anymore, but if you go to a bookstore, there's a huge self-help section. And I like to believe that the people that writing books are qualified to write those books and tell us about, how to have mental health, how to lose weight, how to get a good job, how to keep a good job, and all these self-help things, how to establish good habits. But here's an example of I think a self-help person that's trying to tell people how to raise their kids. This is how to do it. And off the scenes, they're doing all these torturous things to their kids. And no, I'm not saying that they're alleged, because she's admitted to it. So it kind of reminds me of in another era, there were two televangelists, Jimmy Baker and James Swaggart, who would come on the air and say how we all needed to, follow the dictates of their interpretations of biblical scripture. And behind the scenes, they were stealing everything they were stealing money, everything that wasn't nailed down. They were, cheating on their wives. They were doing all kinds of other horrible things. And so who are these people that hold themselves out? How can there be no controls or checks and balances over these people that hold themselves out to us and try and tell us to live our lives better? I mean, people call me a cynic, but I don't think I'm cynical. I'm just experienced. I mean, doesn't it strike you as crazy that these people like her can hold themselves up as so much better than us, and they're really, disgusting human beings?
I was watching a streamer the other day, and they were talking about, they're like a YouTube podcaster, but they were like, "Oh, like some of the people in chat are really funny. Like some of these people are hilarious." It's just like, but some of you aren't. Some of you are annoying, awful people. And then and then it's like, if
That's
you're wondering which ones you are, like if you had to stop and wonder, that means you're probably the funny one. Because the other people aren't thinking that they're doing anything wrong. The other people, are completely oblivious kind of to the world around them. And I think that kind of goes to show with this, where you have these people who think that they're in the right, and that's because their emotions are the most important thing to them, and they're only prioritizing how they feel and what's benefiting them.
Yeah, I agree. All right. I don't have any more closing thoughts. Do you? I would like to urge our viewers to please like and subscribe. We've gotten a lot of new subscribers recently, and we've gotten a lot of new likes recently. So thank you all. We are starting a new feature in this podcast, which we're not going to do on this episode, but in the next episode we will, that we read your comments out loud, as long as they don't have George Carlin's 7 dirty words. Otherwise, that's my closing thoughts. What are yours, Lainey?
Be kind to your families, be kind to your kids. I mean, a lot of people can empathize with the feeling of being a teenager. You don't have control over your emotions, and your hormones are all crazy. Be kind, be empathetic, and just care about the people in your lives and treat them like human beings. Treat people the way you want to be treated. But that being said, like Andrew said, thank you for all the wonderful comments, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.
And that's that.